anyone else been encouraged by that? He won't. He won't fail. He won't fail, which is good news because the story we're going to be living in today is of another time when he did not fail. Here's the tail end, just a few verses. Thank you for standing in honor of the word. The very end of Genesis reads like this. But Joseph said to them, "Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then, don't be afraid. I'll provide for you and for your children." And he reassured them, and he spoke kindly to them. This is the word of God for us, the people of God. Thanks be to God. You may be seated where you are. I just want to point something out. Maybe I'm not alone in sensing this. We always believe that the Spirit of God enters into a person, right? I've heard it said that enters into a person and moves to a person, through a person, to a person, and through a person. There's something what Pierce was saying this morning about we could do this at home all by ourselves. And it just wouldn't be near as much fun, and I believe it wouldn't be near as much powerful. This morning, this church has already been an encouragement to me. I don't know if you sense him in the room. Have you been in a room where you just knew the Spirit was in the room? Like not just like the air around, but like the person of Jesus, the person of his Spirit came into this space and now is more enlarged because you came too. And so I just want to thank you for that, because as we were worshiping this morning, I just had this strong sense that Jesus was kind of walking around the room and like high-fiving people, and thank you for being here, and thank you for bringing me, because somebody in the room needed to meet me today, and your singing and your presence has given the gift already. And I know that it's been given because it was given to me already. Interestingly enough, though, many of you in the room don't know me. You have no idea who I am. And after today, you may be really glad that I'm only here today. I can have that effect on some people. But this church was a source of encouragement to me long before you even knew it. In the summer of 2015, when your pastor was Jason Burnham and you were meeting in a school, Brad, earlier, I was at that school helping you set up and take down one week. And Michael Rafferty was leading worship. And was her name Amy on the cello? What was her name? That's Amy, right? Yeah. Your team blessed me. When I first moved here in 2015, I was about to plant a campus for the Woodlands Methodist Church. They had never done it before. Good news, neither had I. We were all flying blind into this thing. And thanks be to God, Mike Sims was on the staff, and he helped make something beautiful out of something that could have been a train wreck. And it was so much fun together. But I learned how to stack chairs with the help of this church. You may not have seen it in the same way I did, but you blessed me by sending Michael Rafferty to become my worship pastor. I was so grateful to receive him. And the ministry that you raised him up to do, he then was able to do in our presence. And so you have been a source of encouragement to me even before you even realized it. But your pastor is a source of encouragement to me. And maybe he's been a source of encouragement to you too. It's one of his greatest gifts. He's thoughtful. He's thinking about people when they don't even know he's thinking about them, and praying for them when they don't even know that he's praying for them. And on occasion, he'll shoot you a text or he'll catch you in the hall and let you know, I've been praying for you. Or I'm thinking about this thing you're about to go into, and I just want to encourage you as you go into it. I've been on the receiving end of that, and I'm grateful for it. This morning, what I'm hoping to do is try to bring encouragement to you. Encouragement to you from my own story, encouragement to you from God's story. And somehow those two stories are one and the same, I believe. And hearing his, Joseph's, and mine together, it might start to sound a little bit like yours too. And if it does sound like your story, I pray that you'd be encouraged as I've been encouraged through it. Okay, so let's see what we can do together. Genesis chapter 37 is where we're going to spend our time, 37 through 50. It's a long story. So I'll give you a second to find it. But I want to tell you a little bit about my story as you get to that story. So as I've been reading the story of Joseph, every time I read his story, this memory starts to come to me. Back in April of 2004, I was a youth pastor. I was serving a church in the Woodlands off of North Millbend over there. I'd been there for 6 years. I was doing youth ministry. I thought I was doing a pretty good job. I met a beautiful girl there who became my wife. We had our first child there. It was home. My mother-in-law was an elder in the church. We had a really good thing going. I loved that place. Still do love that place and those people. But on a April day of 2004, I was in a staff meeting. The pastor who had hired me had taken a new job up in Kentucky. We had a new pastor come in. And at a staff meeting, I said to that pastor, I said, hey, man, it would be great to spend a little time with you just talking about graduation Sunday. It's around the corner. I've done it a similar way with minor nuances each year. You probably have done something like it at your church where you come from. I'd love to just get your take. Maybe we can put your fingerprints on this. Perfect. That sounds great, he said. I said, okay, perfect. So we get to the end of the staff meeting. He says, why don't we do that right now after staff meeting? Okay. So I ran to my office to get my stuff. And I said, do you want me to come back to your office? Do you want to come meet in my office? Where do we want to have this conversation? He says, I think we should just meet in the library and have it. Okay, wherever you want to meet is fine with me. So I go in and get my stuff, and I come back down the hallway, and I walk into the library, and it wasn't the pastor. At least it wasn't him alone. He was sitting at a table. It was he and two of our key lay leaders in our church. And I noticed the blinds had been shut. And I thought, okay. So I walk in, and I guess we're not talking about graduation Sunday. They slide a piece of paper across the table to me after they motioned to where I would sit. And they said, take a few minutes, Brent, and read the paper, and then we'll talk. So I read the paper. And in short, the paper was saying that if you'll go quietly, we'll give you a severance, but if you choose to not go quietly, we'll fire you. We'd like you to leave next month. This was my first ministry. I didn't know the church treated people this way. And so I read, and I said, okay, I finished. And each of them, one at a time, the three of them, told me why I was being asked to leave. None of it sounded reasonable to me. It's very hurtful, honestly, to be on the receiving end of it. And when we finished, they said, well, Brent, do you have anything you'd like to say? And I said, nothing that would be all that helpful or kind. So no, I've got nothing to say. And I took the piece of paper. I walked out of the library, back down to my office, and I tried to get back to work. I had graduation Sunday coming. But overcome by emotion, I left my work and I went upstairs to our youth room where I tried to pray. And then filled with even more emotion, I just realized I've got to leave. I got to get out of this place. So I went home, and my wife was there at the house with our newborn, firstborn son. And, hey, honey, welcome home. So glad you're here. How was the day? Well, babe, I got fired today. What? And my wife got a little angry. She's my biggest cheerleader, biggest fan. She said, I'm calling my mom. This is unjust. I said, babe, read the paper first. Paper says if we talk about it, we don't get our severance. We have a mortgage and a newborn. We've got to go quietly. I won't stand for this. This is not fair. She had held a shovel at the groundbreaking of this church. I said, well, babe, this is just how it's going to go. It's just what's going to happen. 20 plus years later, when I remember that happening to me, I still carry a little bit of the grief of it. But now with 20 plus years of vantage point, I look back and honestly, I thank the Lord. I thank the Lord for the opportunity to be moved against my will into another part of his will. And we're going to find this happening for Joseph as well. So in chapter 37, we start to get to know him, Joseph. You've probably heard of Joseph. He was the one with the Technicolor dream coat. Remember this guy? So Joseph, his story begins largely in chapter 37 of Genesis. I'm going to do my best to run through 13 chapters here, not reading all of it, but just some key pieces so that we can make sure you get well acquainted with him and with his story. Again, so it'll help you with your own. So we pick up in chapter 37, verse 3. It says, now Israel, who's also named Jacob, by the way, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, third in line here, loved Joseph more than any of his other sons because he had been born to him in his old age. And he made an ornate robe. That's that Technicolor Dreamcoat. I always pictured it with rainbows on it. I don't honestly know what it looked like, but it was ornate. When his brothers saw that their father loved Joseph more than any of them, they hated him, and they couldn't speak a kind word to him. Joseph the favorite. Now, Joseph's also the dreamer, picking up in the very next verse. Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. Can't this guy read the room? He said to them, listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, and your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it. Wasn't that an awesome dream? His brother said to him, wait, do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us? And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. But then he had another dream. How convenient. And he told it to his brothers. Not very smart. Listen, he said, I had another dream, and this time the sun and the moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me. Not just y'all. Now creation's actually bowing to me. He made a lot of great friends with his brothers. So several days later, on down the road, the dad, Jacob, says, hey, Joseph, your brothers are out tending to flocks and such. Would you go out there and check on them, make sure everything's okay? So he goes to check on his brothers. I mean, if you remember the story, as he's still a far way off, the brothers start talking together about, hey, we need to kill this kid. Get him out of our life forever. Let's just get rid of him. But one of the brothers says, no, Reuben, he says, how about the cistern? Just throw him down in the cistern. He'll die down there. We'll never have to deal with him again. But then another brother, Judah, says, whoa, get him out of the cistern. I see some folks coming this way. Maybe we could just sell him, get him even further out of our hair, and we don't have to be a part of his death, at least. So they decided to do that. And while Joseph was taken off as a slave, the brothers take his coat from him, dip it in some goat's blood, take it back home to daddy, and says, Dad, I don't know what happened. Your favorite son, I don't know where he went. This is all we could find. Dad was mortified, inconsolable, and said to them, you cannot help me with my grief. In fact, I will mourn until I join my son in the grave. Super sad. So we leave Jacob and the boys, and we follow Joseph into slavery. Picking up in chapter 39. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. Potiphar, an Egyptian who was one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there. The Lord was with Joseph, so that he prospered. And he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. And when his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household, and he entrusted him to everything he owned. From the time he put him in charge of his household and of all that he owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, both in the house and in the field. So Potiphar left everything he had in Joseph's care. With Joseph in charge, he did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. Things seem to have worked out okay for Joseph. Sold into slavery, but now he's off in this new land, and everything he touches seems to turn to gold. People around him recognize that when Joseph's involved, there's blessings abounding. So let's keep Joseph in charge. And then Joseph runs into a little snag. You see, apparently Joseph was a good-looking dude. I mean, just picture, okay, don't picture me. There's others. Sturdy, handsome, big and strong. And Potiphar's wife became attracted to Joseph and started trying to seduce Joseph. Hey, come over here, young man. Will you lay down with me? Will you be mine? He's like, no. Potiphar gave me everything except for you. And so I want to honor him by staying far from you. Well, finally, she tries to seduce him, takes him by the cloak. He escapes from it, runs. I guess he had other clothing on, and he gets away. But the wife brings the cloak, the robe, over to Potiphar. Says, look at your servant, what he's done. He's making a mockery of me. He tried to get with me, and I had to run him off. And as a result, they put him in jail. Now Joseph's in jail. And we pick up in chapter 39 if you're still following along. The end of verse 20 and a few following. While Joseph was there in the prison, the Lord was with him. The Lord seems to always be with Joseph. He showed him kindness, granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in prison. He was made responsible for all that was done there. And the warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. The Lord gives Joseph success in Potiphar's home. Potiphar's lied against, ends up in prison, and now the guard sees him again, trustworthy. While in prison, the cupbearer and the baker show up. They end up getting thrown in jail as well. Now, they have some dreams of their own. Now, Joseph, remember, he was interpreting his own dreams, but now he's being called upon to interpret the dreams of the cupbearer and the baker. So he hears both of their dreams, and he says back to them, cupbearer, great news. Your dream interpreted means that you're going to be exalted. Baker, not so great for you. You see, the dream you had is going to result in you being executed. So the baker's gone, out of the story. Cupbearer continues. Cupbearer ends up in the presence of Pharaoh. A couple years later, Pharaoh starts having dreams. He has a couple. Cupbearer remembers the dream interpreter that he was spending time in prison with, and they send for Joseph. Hey, come interpret Pharaoh's dreams. So he does. And in the interpretation, he says to Pharaoh, hey, there's a famine on its way. There's going to be abundance for a period of time, but then it'll be followed by famine. And Pharaoh looks at Joseph and says, hey, if you can interpret that, can I also put you in charge? Surprising, Joseph becomes in charge again. And now he's in charge for the first number of years, gathering grain, storing it all up, and he does this all over Egypt. And then when the famine comes, he's in charge of doling it out, selling it to those in need. And this is where things get really interesting. So you turn the page and we go back to where Jacob is. We got Joseph living in Egypt, but meanwhile back in the ranch or in Canaan, we have Jacob and the boys. And the famine has been a little tough for them too. They're starving to death. And Jacob comes to his boys and says, hey, why are we talking here? Let's go take care of our hunger. I'm sending you off to Egypt to go and buy some grain. And so Jacob withholds one of the boys. Benjamin stays behind. He sends the rest of them. And when they arrive, an interesting thing happens. They bump into Joseph. But they don't realize it's Joseph. Joseph knows it's them, but they don't know it's him. They came to buy grain. Joseph sells them grain. He then asks them all sorts of questions about them. Are you spies? And he's trying to figure out, can I trust you guys? And so one of the things that he decides to do, as he knows that they are his brothers, is he says, okay, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go back because you have another brother, right? We do, but he stayed back with dad. Okay, I want you to go back and get him. I want to see that boy. But I'm not sure if I can trust you, so I'd ask that you leave one of your brothers here. I'll take him. He chose Simeon. The rest of you go back. And go back with the grain, eat the grain, but get your other brother and come on back. I want to see you again. So he sends them back. And we flip ahead to 45. We're getting really close to the end here. This story seems to have its ups, its downs, it's going this way and that way. All the while, God is at work. So Joseph sends them back. They go back. They find Jacob and the brothers. And they say to dad, look, the guy who gave us the grain, who sold us the grain, he kept one of the boys. And Jacob's like, good gracious. I keep losing boys everywhere along the way. Go back and get him. If we're going to go back, we have to bring Benjamin with us. No. You keep losing my sons. Sorry, Pops. The guy who gave us the grain said we cannot come back without him. Finally, Jacob relents, and they come back. And when they get back, we're in chapter 45. Then Joseph could no longer control himself before all of his attendants, and he cried out, have everyone leave my presence. So there was no one with Joseph when he made himself known to his brothers. The time has finally come for the reunion. Joseph, it says in the Bible, wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard him, and Pharaoh's household heard about it. Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? But his brothers were not able to answer him because they were terrified at his presence. Then Joseph said to his brothers, come close to me so I can kick y'all's. Come close to me." When they had done so, he said, "I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed. And do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now, there's been a famine here in the land, and for the next 5, there will be no plowing and reaping. But God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So then, it was not you who sent me here, but God." The story continues. Word spreads that these are Joseph's family. Pharaoh says, "Look, you need to go get Dad. Dad's still alive. Go get him and bring all the family back, and I'll even give them land. I'm going to take good care of Joseph's family." So they go back, they get Dad. Dad shows up. There's this heartwarming reunion. Jacob is so glad to get to see his favorite son again and the others that he thought he might never see again. He puts blessing on the boys and then dies. And after Jacob dies and the period of mourning passes, the boys go and they have him buried. And then on their way back to Egypt, fear creeps in. Not with Joseph, but with the rest of the brothers. We pick up in chapter 50 and verse 15. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "What if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrongs that we did to him?" So they sent word to Joseph saying, "Your father left these instructions before he died. This is what you are to say to Joseph. I ask you to forgive your brothers the sins and the wrongs they committed in treating you so badly. Now please forgive the sins of the servants of the God of your father." And when their message came to him, Joseph wept. His brothers then came and threw themselves down before him. "We are your slaves," they said. I mean, can you just picture that moment? Joseph has already told them, previous chapters, look, you're free. God used you, actually, to help me and ultimately to have me help you. This was all bigger than the little plan you had. But they're fearful. Now the dad's out of the picture. Was he doing all this, putting on a show for Dad? Surely he's going to treat us harshly now. That's not what happens. What happens is what I read at the very beginning of our message. In verse 19, Joseph said to them as they all are there prostrate before him, "Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what's now being done, the saving of many lives. So then don't be afraid. I'll provide for you and for your children." And he reassured them and he spoke kindly to them. I mean, Joseph has a wonderful opportunity right here. But in this moment, in this opportunity, there's no anger. There's no retribution. There's no shaming, no blaming. There's release. Release of guilt. Release of responsibility. He set them free. I think, how could he do such a thing? How could he just set them free, let them go after all that they'd done to him? I mean, he had them right where he wanted them. And he could have taught them a really important lesson. You know, he did. He taught them a really important lesson. And when I read the story and I think about my own life, he's teaching me a really important lesson too. Sometimes what people do that it feels like they did on purpose to harm me, maybe it wasn't to harm me. Maybe they just didn't know that what they were doing and what they were saying would be received as harm. I mean, every now and then people do harm us on purpose. But as I look back on that April day in 2004, what I've come to realize is those guys weren't trying to hurt me. They really believed that the decision they were making was going to be for the good of the church. They really believed that the future of the church needed to be a future that didn't have me, but instead had someone else. And as much harm as it caused me in that moment, I look back now, 20 plus years later, with fresh eyes and a deep sense of gratitude. One of the men that was at that table actually is now a member of the Woodlands Methodist Church. And when I see him around the church, I can hug him and I can thank him. I've long since forgiven him and the other men who sat at that table. Because the Lord has been so kind to show me what the Lord was showing Joseph. That the plans they were making were actually being used in the greater plan of God. You know, what I've learned from the scriptures and what I'm learning in my own life of faith is maybe something you've learned too. That when the Lord makes a promise to us to never leave us, to never forsake us, he keeps that promise. He never leaves. He never forsakes. And when his word that we read later in the New Testament, when his word says that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose, when he said that, he meant that too. And he follows through. He follows through on his plans that are for our good and ultimately for his glory. You know, someone said not long ago, and I'm sure they borrowed it from someone else, I don't know who should get credit for this, but in a world where we play checkers, we come to find out that God is playing chess. We seem to believe we can read where all of this is headed, and all the while God is back saying, you don't have my mind. My ways are not your ways. My thoughts not your thoughts. You think you've got this figured out. Worse, you think you've got me figured out. But I'm doing a thing. By faith, Joseph stepped back and he took a good long look at his life. And in it, he saw God's hand at work. What's interesting is, as he was sitting back looking, he could see within his lifetime where God has been moving. But when I was reading, I was called to a different part of this story that I had never made any notice of. So give me just a few extra minutes if you don't mind. I want to see if you see what I've seen here. So it goes back to Hebrews chapter 11, where this whole sermon series begins. We went to Hebrews 11. We said, let's find the giants of the faith, the men and the women who created a journey of faith that's impacted our journey of faith. And when they talk about Joseph, the writer of Hebrews says that by faith, Joseph, when his end was near, he spoke about the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt and gave instructions concerning the burial of his bones. Like, of all of the story of Joseph, the burial of his bones was never on the flannel graph when I was sitting there drinking that watered down punch and eating those stale cookies. That was never in the story. But it is in the story. If you read the end of chapter 50, it says that Joseph said to his brothers, I'm about to die, but God will surely come to your aid and take you up out of this land to the land that he promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Jacob, his dad. He's now fourth generation of the promise. He's that close to having heard the promise. And Joseph made the Israelites swear an oath and said, God will surely come to your aid, and then you must carry my bones up from this place. The faith of Joseph has to include the story of his bones. Because not only does he see God at work in just the short time of his life from age 17 to death, but he recognizes, wait a second, God ultimately sets all of us free. Abraham, the promise. Isaac, the promise. Jacob, the promise. My dad heard the promise. I want to be there when the promise is fulfilled. My life is a part of an even bigger story. If you keep reading the story of our people, the people of God, you'll find that in Exodus, when the people are set free from slavery, they don't leave without his bones. They grab his bones. Things like Exodus 13. And if you keep reading the story and they finally go through all the wilderness and all the things that we know Moses did with the people, they eventually get to the promised land where Joshua's now leading them. And there's that famous verse in Joshua 24 where Joshua says, look, you choose today who you're going to serve, the gods of the people where we are gathering now, or the God who got us here, the God who made a promise to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and through Joseph. Whoever you're going to serve, choose. And then at the end of that chapter, you find them taking Joseph's bones and burying them in the land that Jacob had owned. Come on, it's mind-blowing to me. And I think, is this so mind-blowing of a concept, of an idea, that we can get so caught up in our own search for the good life that when things aren't as good as we wanted them to be, we start to believe that God has left us? Is it possible that we become so focused on the little minutia moments of our own little lives that we've forgotten there's a bigger story that includes you, and it also includes you, and even you, and you. Like we're being invited. I was invited. I'm just inviting you to join me in this journey of what would it look like if I took a step back out of the little day-to-day stuff that has me ups and downs, and I step back and notice that my life is a lot like the stock market. That over time, the highs and lows aren't nearly as big as they are in the moment. And if I started to look instead of why God, every turn, why God is this bad thing happening to me, and why God is this good thing happening to them, if we step back and instead of asking why, I said, hey, where God are you in this? Where God are you moving in me? Where God are you moving in him? Where God might you be moving his life and my life in concert, all for your will? It's a different way of living than I live most days. And I suspect it's a different way of living than you live most days. But it appears the truth of the scripture says your life is bigger than what you see, and your life is a part of a bigger story than you. Man, that's good news. So I want to pray that it'd be good news for you, as one who can confess it's been good news for me. Let's pray together. God, I suspect that there are brothers and sisters of mine who can remember their own moments sitting at a table and being completely caught off guard by a decision that somebody else was making that was going to impact the life that they were living. I imagine that there are people in the room who received a phone call, maybe job-related, maybe health-related, and when they got the call, they began to wonder if their life was over in that moment. If all the things they'd been planning towards and planning for, and somehow all of that was going to come to waste, that the trajectory was headed in the wrong direction. And I just have a sense that when I was telling my story and telling Joseph's story, that so many of us were able to go back into our own stories and remember a moment just like that. And that part of our story may be a part that we are still carrying. And we're still angry about it. We're still frustrated by it. We still believe that somebody owes us something for that. We deserved better. And I think you want to shift us a bit. I think you want to invite us to open our hands from the tight grip we've had on what we thought was fair and right and good, and in the process become curious about where you may have been taking us. Lord, I just thank you right now that when I thought you had deserted me, that you were actually releasing me, so that a number of years later you could invite me into pastoring the church at Wood Forest. What they seemed to be intending for my harm, you intended for my good, for the purposes of the salvation of many. And I just suspect you invited me into that. I see evidence of it. So would you give eyes of faith to the room? To give eyes of faith to the rest of us in the room, that maybe what we're walking through, maybe even right now, could be, just might be, something you're doing for us. Like it's a gift you're unpacking for us. Help us to be discerning, Jesus. And while we try to figure it all out, just stay close. Stay close. Lord, thank you for meeting with us here this morning in the room, the way that you caused our hearts to burn as we sang. We opened our eyes to your word and to your nearness. We thank you for that. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.